I got a buddy who's got his pilot's license and he has access to this little Cessna, and I had to go do a show in Palm Beach, and so we flew there and flew back on the same day. And when you land in Palm Beach, now named Donald J. Trump Airport, you're greeted with the Trump jet, the famous Trump campaign jet, not Air Force One, but it sits right there on the tarmac, and it is, well, beautiful plane and also impossible to miss. And it would be impossible to miss if you're somebody who was sitting in a deer stand with full view of President Trump getting off that plane and walking out of the open doorway. This is what the Secret Service found, and they dismantled and sent to the FBI a deer stand that would have a clean shot of the president as he's getting off his plane. Donald Trump landing and taking off from the Palm Beach airport with such proximity and regularity has been a liability. It's not the first time that we've seen somebody try and shoot his plane out of the sky. And if you've been covering these things, you'll remember that Ryan Routh intended on killing Trump with a rocket launcher by blowing up his plane using a Stinger RPG to take out his plane from the sky as it's landing. And again, it is impossible to miss. Even somebody that doesn't know how to fire a missile would be able to hit this thing because it's like, well, pretty obvious if he had the hardware, and he was going to Ukraine for that hardware. Interesting, isn't it? Has Ukraine illegally smuggled U.S. weapons to kill other world leaders or state enemies? We asked as we uncovered this, that he said, get me a rocket-propelled grenade or Stinger missile, and I will blow up Trump. Trump's not good for Ukraine, he said. He planned on shooting Trump's plane out of the sky and destroying it as Trump was on the plane. Okay. Why are we talking about this? Relatively old story, right? Happened before the election. Well, Trump was in Turkey. And Turkey is, of course, the critical land bridge between the Orient, Middle East, and Eastern Europe. And it also borders Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And Trump was there for a NATO meeting. Turkey is a NATO country. And Donald Trump did something very strange. He arrived on his brand new Air Force One that Donald Trump is a huge fan of, obviously. Spent a lot of time getting it retrofitted and ready to fly. President Trump been showing it off. And then he left on a very different Air Force One, the Air Force One that you know, periwinkle blue, kind of famous. But now we know that Donald Trump actually didn't do either of those things, that President Trump left on a very different plane, a military jet that had its transponder off entirely. Trump used a catering truck in order to get across the runway to a different plane. Here's the actual moment of this happening. Trump boarding the plane. They shut the door. Then Trump gets into one of these catering trucks with the scissor lift, that goes up. The media get loaded onto the plane. And Donald Trump is driven away in the back of a, cargo truck and taken to a different plane, as you can see over here. That plane is also a U.S. military jet, but it's more of a black ops jet. It looks like this. Why did they have so many of the president's jets there? Why did they turn the transponder off? What's going on here? Well, we've heard that there was an Iranian threat against the president, that Trump had to do this because there was an assassination attempt from Iran, and that Donald Trump was using this different plane in order to avoid that assassination attempt. But we don't know exactly what they were trying to do. So now we do actually know what they were trying to do. This is the plane that Trump got on. It flew to England. They were able to then transfer Trump back to Air Force One in England, but this is the plane that turned off its transponder and flew under a different call sign. Shoulder-fired missile threat prompted Trump's plane ruse, source says. Oh my. Okay, here we go. A specific threat to Air Force One was a shoulder-fired missile emerged in the final days of the last month of NATO summit in Turkey, according to a person familiar with the matter, prompting the scramble of U.S. officials to devise a plan to sneak Trump out of the country on an alternate jet. The threat was specific enough that officials feared that Trump's life would be an enormous risk if he flew out of the country on either the Legacy Air Force One plane or the Qatar-donated jet that he used to fly into the summit. The person declined to say whether information about the threat originated, but they said that they believed it to be a serious part of how specifically the Iranians seemed to know the details of Trump's arrangement in Turkey. Trump spent the night in Anarka, the Turkish capital, in a luxury chain hotel downtown, traveled several times between the hotel and the summit venues. Officials, including the military and Secret Service, put together the plan to move Trump to another plane by way of a catering truck to fly out of the country within hours. Trump had been accompanied to Turkey by several officials. The video analysis by CNN showed officials from the airport began positioning the catering truck on the side of the Air Force One before the motorcade arrived on the tarmac. After Trump boarded the plane, the catering truck's container was lowered and it drove away to a different plane. It goes on to say that the scheme was startling in its intelligence acuteness. They knew the floor that President Trump was staying on in Turkey. They knew where his motorcade was going to go. They knew where his plane was, and they had RPGs ready to shoot down the plane. This is why we started with the Ryan Routh thing, because it's the exact same kind of scheme here. U.S. intelligence detected Iranian surface-to-air missiles against President Trump and Air Force One. They learned Tehran knew the exact building and floor where Donald Trump was staying. Yikes. New reporting sheds more light on where Trump was secretly removed. U.S. intelligence reported picking up multiple streams of information indicating specific surface-to-air missile threat against the aircraft. Someone near the NATO summit was also reportedly observed with a shoulder-fired missile. Even more concerning is that U.S. officials say Iranian intelligence knew where Trump was staying. He knew the floors of the building. The threat was considered credible enough to trigger an extraordinary deception where Trump boarded multiple Air Force Ones on his takeoff. There's no public evidence that Iran actually attempted to attack the aircraft. The combination of potential risks led for them to make some drastic movements. The biggest unanswered question may be how Iran obtained such detailed information about the president's lodging. So President Trump said, I go by the Secret Service and the military. They wanted to go on a different flight, a different plane. I do what they say. There was a threat out there, and I don't ask too many questions.
Safety, but they wanted me to do it, so I do it. I do what they say.
What's the nature of the threat?
I guess there was a threat out there. I didn't really ask too much about it. I get a lot of threats.
I do what the military tells me to do. Beast mode. I don't worry about it. My attitude is whatever, says Trump. He has been shot in the head already. Why is it too dangerous for you to fly on Air Force One, but not the press? Trump, I don't know. I think actually the plane that I flew on was at greater risk because that would be the plane they would most likely go for. Right. Iran planned to use a shoulder-to-air missiles to destroy Air Force One. Now, if I remember correctly, Iran just bought a ton of shoulder-to-air shoulder-fired missiles from China this past week. According to reports, Israeli intelligence warned Trump of the potential attack, shoulder-fired missiles. Security officials then reportedly moved Trump to another plane through the catering truck. CNN, of course, argues that Trump gave an illegal order to let the media fly on the decoy flight. They expect one of us in the wreckage. They'll expect one of us in the wreckage. People on the airport catering truck who secretly moved with the president. Dan Scavino, Walt Nottom, Natalie Harp. That's according to material reviewed by the Washington Post. So who's leaking the Washington Post this stuff? Goodness. Possible surface-to-air missiles. I mean, these things can, of course, be very, very deadly. But they were left on board. Key cabinet secretaries were left on board the decoy flight. President Trump took off in a secret plane. Here's the image of that actually happening. Goodness. Okay. And now we know. A lot of reporters think of themselves as a fourth and co-equal branch of government. You can't actually confuse them as to why the security of the president and security for them isn't equal. Your friends are trying to murder him. So, here's Trump golfing with the surface-to-air missile right beside him. What a time that we live in. Holy moly. Pray for the security of the president. Obviously, these kind of things have been tried to use to kill Donald Trump, and damn, they were nearly successful. The guy took a bullet to the head. Remember that? So pray for the security of the president. I'm glad they are taking whatever security measures they need. Stop trying to kill him. It's your boy Benny. Like, share, and subscribe.